I'm Daniel with the Coppell Arts Center, and I'm here with Michelle Hauske, who is a fine arts teacher at Coppell High School. How long have you been teaching?
This is actually my fourth year teaching.
Fourth year.
So I'm still kind of a new teacher, and I've always been with Coppell ISD.
Okay, that's great. Excellent. And we are featuring our current exhibit, Hindsight is 2020, which is featuring 8 students who are high school seniors at Coppell High School. Could you tell us a little bit more about the name, Hindsight is 2020? Who chose that and what does that mean?
So we chose it together as a group. We kind of put a bunch of titles together. 2020 was a year that greatly impacted all of us, and for these students, because IB is a 2-year cycle, we went under quarantine in 2020, and so these particular students have been learning at home the entire time, and so we kind of felt that Hindsight 2020 was a good, appropriate term because we're kind of reflecting on times before COVID, and then kind of reflecting on life during COVID, throughout COVID. And so this body of work was made, some of it before, and most of it during. And so we kind of voted, and that's kind of how we came up with the title of the show.
Wonderful. So yeah, as you mentioned, these are students who are participating in the International Baccalaureate program. And so this exhibit is the culmination of 2 whole years of work. Could you tell us a little bit more about the IB program?
Sure. So IB is different than advanced placement, for example. With an advanced placement class, you pick the class, and it's kind of isolated. If you're in the IB program, you're enrolled both junior and senior year, and all of your classes are international baccalaureate classes. So all of your core classes, including your foreign language, and then you have an elective. And so these students have chosen art as their IB elective. And so at the end, it's a very rigorous program. They have internal assessments, and they have testing at the end. And at the end of the cycle, if they complete all of these components and they score well in all of their different areas, then they get awarded an International Baccalaureate Diploma, which is basically recognized internationally. So a lot of students want to study abroad or want to go to college outside of this country, and so that's kind of one of their main, driving factors for being in IB, but it's very rigorous.
And what does that look like for art specifically?
So for the IB art students, there are kind of 3 different areas that they're assessed on. One of them is the exhibition. And so not only do they have to create artwork, but they have to actually curate a show. So they have to think about visual relationships, what does it mean when you install one work next to another. They're looking for visual coherency and conceptual coherency, and then how does the audience engage with that. So that's a big component, but in addition to that, they're also writing a visual research paper. So they're looking at artists from across different cultures and comparing their formal qualities and concepts, and that research goes into kind of influencing their own art making. And then they're also keeping a process documentation where they have to show their thinking, basically. So it's theoretical, curatorial, and studio practices all combined. So everything gets submitted in April. So these seniors are about to submit all of this work, this 2 years worth of work, to try to earn credit for IB Visual Arts.
And are they recording an interview as well?
So they actually removed that component.
Okay. So
they won't have the interview. So this is really going to be based off of the visuals and then the writing that they supply this year.
Okay. Wow, well that's still a lot of work for just one class.
It is a lot of work, and also remember that this is exponential because it's IB, so they're doing work in English, they're doing work in math, they're doing work in science. It's not quite like College Board where if you take an AP class, it's very isolated. They're working on things in all areas. In addition, they're writing a research paper on a topic that they choose with a mentor. And they have to do a community service project as well. So as a program, it's very, very rigorous.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I studied it, it was a very holistic program.
Yeah.
And everything was done. Each class somehow transferred into another class and everything kind of bled over.
Yeah, there's lots of real world applications, and also IB thinkers are taught to be very global. And you're right, they do kind of coincide with one another. So in the past, before COVID, I partnered with multiple IB teachers where we did a science of color, where IB chemistry students actually made pigments, and then we
How cool.
actually created watercolors, and then we actually painted with them, and then so we've done joint things like that. It's just this year has been a little bit different, but.
So speaking about this year, the students in IB always have to be disciplined,
Yep.
but this year must have presented a whole different kind of challenge. They're working mostly from home, is that correct?
This particular batch is, yes, all 8 of the students here, not all IB students are, but this particular group of students have been at home since March. So, for art, that means that they're limited to what they have at home. They don't have a studio. And so we've had lots of back and forth of supply pickups and dropping off supplies at their house. But then they've also had to be adaptive, and it's really hard to make art in a vacuum. It's really hard when you take away. When you are in a studio, you are learning from your peers, even though you don't realize it. You're feeding off their creative energy. You're learning processes and techniques from them. And so, to accommodate that, I've tried to hold Zoom open sessions where we can just be making art and talking to each other and tried to do that. We've done lots of critiques, but it's still not the same. It's so much harder making art by yourself in your bedroom than it would be in a classroom studio space. And so these students have proven that they can do it, and it's been a struggle. It's just not the same, but they've been able to do a pretty good job. So
Yeah, it can't be disputed for sure. It must have posed quite a few challenges for you just as a teacher.
It has. This year has been, I think something that's been floating around for everybody is that it doesn't matter how many years you've taught, we're all basically first-year teachers again because, we're having to learn new online platforms, we're having to learn new ways of keeping student engagement, and so for all of us, it's like we're starting all over again. In a class like art or, biology, where you have like a lab where it's very hands-on, you have to adjust. And so when you're an art teacher, art teaching is very responsive, so I can see what you're doing and then respond to your needs or show you a technique on the side. But that kind of gets taken away when they're virtual and I can't see the work in process. So I can see it through photographs or through, again, like a Zoom session. But until you have the physical thing in your hand, it's really hard to evaluate it and make suggestions and things. And so that's been a big challenge for teaching art, is just how can I adapt this assignment with materials you may have at home, and how can I structure it so that I can still provide you feedback along the way and not just catch the end result. And so it's been for me personally, it's been a big struggle. So.
Well, speaking about materials and mediums, if I remember correctly, the students get to choose by themselves which mediums they use. You don't dictate any of that.
No, I am basically a timekeeper for this class especially. When they enter their junior year, I expose them to a variety of materials and processes so that when they come to their senior year, they really have a grasp on what they want to do. And so the subject matter, the material is all up to them. Some of them work primarily two-dimensionally, like all painting. Some of them are doing sculpture as well. It's really what they want. So really, it comes down to a lot of one-on-one sessions with, you want to do this project, you want to use this material, and we talk about the best way of executing it. It's all custom to what they want to do, not me. It's them. So I'm their timekeeper, the time manager, and then I can expose them to new artists to look at, and I can try to research materials and really kind of be a sounding board, so that when they tell me what they want to do, I can give them feedback on, okay, that sounds great, or what if you did this, or have you heard of this material, let me show you how to do this. But really this is all of their work. This is not me telling them, you must do a portrait. It's all from them.
And all these works are self-initiated.
Yeah, all of them.
They come up with a concept, they come up with a medium.
Yes.
They start from scratch.
Oh yes, we have a planning process, but it's all that. None of it's coming from me again. Our class looks like they have a calendar of deadlines and critique days, and They have to research artists, they have to research the processes, the materials, they have to experiment with the materials before they actually handle them. And for a lot of these students, honestly, I've had all these students for more than 2 years. I've had them in other classes. They're as sophomores, some of them even as freshmen. Some of them I've known for 4 years. So, they've been in other art courses. So really they're bringing their knowledge of materials and then synthesizing it all together to create a body of work.
So speaking about how long you've known these students, this is their final exhibit before they graduate.
Yeah.
And how have these students evolved in both their technique and their concepts in these last 2-4 years?
A lot. That's a big question. So again, I've had these students in AP, some of them in AP drawing, so they've submitted portfolios to College Board. I've had them in AP Art History, I've had them in drawing classes. They have matured a lot as far as content, and I think they really kind of developed their own personal styles. And it's hard to do that, especially as a high schooler, to really figure out what do you want to say, how are you going to say it in a way. And even when you look at their label text and when you look at their work, you can get a sense of who they are. And so I think that's been the biggest accomplishment, is just that they're so tailored to them as an individual, and that's what they've learned, and they've kind of grown.
Yeah, and some of them are tackling quite large topics. One of the artist's statements was about feminism and the role of women in society. I know that a lot of them have been drawing on the culture of their parents and the countries that they come from. They're also taking on some more contemporary social movements.
Yep. This summer, again, I think 2020 had a huge influence. You don't see COVID, which it's funny because a lot of people ask me if even the AP students, if they're doing work over COVID, and it's not COVID, it's everything else, social issues, the depression, anxiety of being stuck at home, how how we socialize is changing. So a lot of the work that you see in this show and you'll see in the AP show is influenced by COVID, but COVID is not the subject matter. And yes, a lot of them are drawing from personal experiences or family ties, or coming here and finding out who they are, their identity. Coppell is very diverse, and I'm really grateful for that because I get to learn a lot about them and different cultures, and so a lot of them are bringing in their own cultural lens. And again, they've grown too, so they may have started somewhere last year and then they've ended up here.
So was it a conscious choice for the students to not depict or confront coronavirus head on?
I don't know.
Were they just more interested in kind of the additional aspects of life?
It must be. I mean, it's not like I told them they couldn't do it, but students who are making work, again, in the AP class this year as well, because they make a lot of work, no one's really hitting COVID directly, but you can definitely see impacts of COVID on us and the work that they're making. It's just they're not saying, how has COVID impacted me? It's they're finding other personal avenues to pursue, which I think makes it more meaningful. Yeah,
that's very impressive.
Yeah.
I think, thinking about my high school senior class, I think we would have approached our time a little bit more literally. So it's very impressive.
You could definitely see you doing that. I mean, it makes sense to do that, but I think you'll see some of that in the work, but it's not obvious. It's not toilet paper shortages and and lots of viruses and medical kind of imagery. So it's interesting to see what they come up with.
For sure. And how many of them are going to be pursuing art as a career?
A lot of them. I'm trying to think of, from this batch, there's at least 4 of them going on for art degrees, maybe 5. They're still getting commitments back, but they've been accepted to places like Savannah College of Art and Design, the UT Art History program. They're applying to RISD and California, Cal Arts, and a bunch of different art schools. And I'm just trying to tell you, I don't know the exact number right now of which ones are committed, because I think they're still waiting on things coming back in, but they're interested from this batch, illustration and concept design and architecture, art history are kind of some of the degrees that they've been targeting, design especially.
That's quite a breadth of subjects.
Yeah, this graduating class has a lot of visual art-minded students this year. We have a lot across, not just in IB, but in AP.
And you mentioned there's a strong theater
interest
as well.
Yeah, our visual arts and our the theater department, we have a lot of, just this particular class is very art heavy, which is great. But it also means that they're going to leave, so it's also sad, but it's also great. So.
Well, I'm sure they'll come back and maybe educate your upcoming students.
Have an alumni.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I mentioned to you before that it's very impressive the variety of mediums and subjects because it's the only one class of a very large program. They're really stretched for time, very thin.
Time management is the most difficult, and making art takes time, especially oil paintings like these. I mean, these are 70, 80 hours worth of time.
Yeah.
So,
and that's before drawing.
Right. So, art takes time, and these students have had to learn how to prioritize their time, and it's even harder when you're at home. So, when you're at the school, your time is kind of allotted to you, and at home, you have to be self-disciplined to keep up with the work, and it's been challenging. I mean, it's been challenging on everybody, teachers, students alike. But when they're passionate about things like art, they find ways to make time to make it work. So I'm very proud of them for that, because it's been a really rough year.
Most of the students in my year, when we were graduating, we all focused on photography because it was the quickest, it was the easiest to iterate, and we were able to just go through our works in a timely manner that allowed us to study for other classes as well.
No, that makes sense.
So,
I mean, some of them did some photography, but a lot of these students have drawing background and painting background, and so I think they pursue what they love, despite the time.
Yes,
So, and again, like some of these works, they weren't all made this year. Some of them were made last year, so they've had time to make work, but they also have to make the time to make the work.
But especially with the self-discipline and tackling these more difficult mediums, it's incredibly impressive.
Yeah, no, I'm very proud of them. You can see that they put a lot of time and work into this, and that they're passionate about it. And so I think it's a good reflection of who they are as individuals, and again how they've grown. And so it'll probably also teach them and over-prepare them for college, because they've had to self-discipline and not have a teacher dictating their time. So this is basically, when they go off to school.
Yeah, this has been a dry run for college.
Yeah, exactly. So they have a little taste of it.
And quite a few of them have been offered scholarships already, is that correct?
Yep, yeah, a lot of them have scholarships. And again, a lot of them are still waiting on hearing back from certain schools, but they're all in a good spot, I think, so.
Well, that's really wonderful. And did they know that they were going to have their works exhibited here at the Coppell Arts Center?
They knew it this year. I had been communicating with basically trying to set this up. We didn't know if it was going to happen because of COVID. Last year, we always have a show, but it's in the high school. Last year, our graduating class didn't have an exhibition. It was all virtual, and so the seniors last year lost a lot of that. And so they knew that our goal was to have it here, as long as we could make it happen. So they knew in August of this year that was our goal. Now, were we going to get that? We didn't know. So they at least had a goal in mind, and then they also knew that they had to do this for their diploma anyway. So it was going to happen somewhere, if it was in their home or at the high school. But I'm so happy to have it here. I think it's amazing. And
does having it in an off-site location, does that motivate the students more, knowing that there's a larger public who is interested in their works?
I would hope so. I think so. I think it has, and also it just elevates the importance of it, because the space is so amazing. So it gives you all that time that you dedicated. It just makes it that much more meaningful, because you have a space that can showcase your work, but then the public can see it. And so when we exhibit things in the high school, really high school is very closed off to what you can see. And so I think this is a great opportunity for them. And I love the connection back to the community. So I think it's really, really important to have that relationship.
Well, this building has been a 20-year dream in the making,
Yeah.
And it was spearheaded by Pete Wilson, who taught at Coppell for a very long time. So we're very happy that we're able to accommodate this space with the community in mind, and to have the local students featured here.
It's an amazing space, and I think the partnership is fantastic, and I can't wait to see what else y'all bring here. So.
Well, the next exhibit of the AP Scholars will be great as well, I'm sure. Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss?
I don't think so. I just wanted to say that as a teacher, I'm very proud of them and their professionalism. And I'm so glad about this relationship and this partnership. And thank you for having me.
Of course, well, it was my pleasure, and we are hoping everyone stops by for the IB exhibit, which is closing on the 24th, and then we'll be setting up the AP Scholar exhibit as well. So there's going to be lots of fantastic work. That one will be even larger than this exhibit.
Yes.
And what mediums will that one feature?
So the AP studio is broken into 3 different categories. So I teach the drawing portfolio. So my students are working primarily with traditional drawing materials and digital. And then we have 2D design, which is majority digital, so photography, digital design. And then we have our 3D track, so we'll have some sculpture as well.
Excellent.
So the difference between this one and that one is that these kids are not required to kind of target their work, whereas in the AP studio, they're targeted very much for drawing 2D or 3D. And so you won't have multidisciplinary works from one student. We will still have it all here, it'll just be from different kids.
Right. And those will be a variety of grades and ages, correct?
Yes, yeah. So these are all seniors, but the AP program, we have sophomores, juniors, and seniors.
Well, that'll be very exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be a good show. So.
Excellent. Well, thank you for watching. And again, stop by the Mr. Cooper Group Lobby Gallery to see all this excellent student work for yourself. Thank you.